Welcome, wanderer, to the democratic center of Athens, otherwise known as the Pnyx. The battles fought here may be more intellectual than bloody, but they are no less spectacular. These outcomes will affect an entire city in a different way. The Pnyx was the meeting place of the Athenian assembly and the physical embodiment of democracy at work. This tour will give you insight into how citizens made decisions and kept the city running. We can talk more when you have finished the tour. See you soon, wanderer.
The Athenian assembly was known as the Ecclesia. It met at the Pnyx 40 times a year to discuss various civic matters, and each session usually lasted a few hours. The word Pnyx is believed to mean something close to packed together. This was probably a reference to the fact that during meetings of the Ecclesia, the location would be filled to its capacity, with citizens packed in practically shoulder to shoulder. All male citizens were allowed to directly participate in the democratic process. Those over 20 years old had the right to speak and vote, while those over 30 could be elected to the higher position of magistrate. In total, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens in the classical period. To draft and adopt decrees, 6,000 of them had to attend the meeting. Citizens came from all over Attica's 10 districts to attend the meetings of the Ecclesia. The meeting was presided over by an executive council called the Prytanes. Every session began with a sacrifice to Zeus Agoreos, the patron of the assembly. During the meeting, citizens delivered speeches from the Pnyx's platform on whatever issues the city faced. Afterwards, the issue was voted on with a show of hands from the gathered assembly. The Ecclesia made important decisions about subjects like grain importation, expenses, and declarations of war. While they could not directly enact laws, they had a say in appointing Athens legislators, which gave them a large role in shaping the city's daily operations. While some citizens only participated in the sessions of the Ecclesia, others could become more involved in democracy as magistrates. Magistrates were elected from among Athenian citizens over 30. They were often successful orators and charismatic politicians, and they held much more sway over important decisions than the average citizen. One of the most famous magistrates was Pericles, who was so popular, he held his position for 15 years. In theory, every Athenian citizen over the age of 20 had the right to participate in the assembly. However, some of them lived far from the city, and others could not financially afford to miss a day of work to attend meetings. For these reasons, the city introduced a special allowance called a misthos ecclesiastikos in the 4th century BCE, meant to encourage participation. Originally, it was 2 obols, but the politician Cleon raised it to 3. Athens introduced several innovations that heavily influenced modern society, including theater, architecture, and philosophy. However, their greatest contribution was their democratic government, which introduced the concept of a city ruled by its citizens. The decision to adopt democracy as a government a choice made in 508 BCE, shaped civilization as we know it, and continues to affect us today.
Hello again, Wanderer. I trust you appreciated learning about the inner workings of the city. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Then let's start with a simple question. Approximately how many citizens were in Athens in my time? Yes, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens, although the population as a whole was much larger. On to the second question. Who of the following was a famous Athenian magistrate? Yes, Pericles was an extremely popular magistrate who managed to keep his position for 15 years. Only one question left. What does the word Pnyx mean? Correct. The Pnyx was usually crowded with citizens attending meetings of the Ecclesia. You know enough about democracy to be a politician yourself. Well done, Wanderer. It would be my pleasure to take you to your next destination. Follow me.
Where are we now? We are right down here. Okie dokie.
Welcome to the Gymnasium of the Kinosaries, one of the many places where philosophers came to enrich the mind and enlighten the spirit. There is no better setting for learning than in a quiet place far away from the commotion of the city. Education held a very important place in Greek society. The most prominent educators were philosophers, whose teachings ranged from everyday rituals to the makeup of the universe. Once your tour is complete, come find me, and we can discuss what you've learned. Farewell for now, Wanderer.
Philosophy comes from the Greek word philosophia, or love of wisdom. This concept was in direct contrast with philochromatia, love of money, and philotimia, love of honor. As of the second half of the 5th century BCE, Athens was known as Greece's capital of philosophy. Due to the rise of democracy, there was an increasing need for education beyond the basic subjects of elementary school. Athenian citizens needed to be able to participate in various functions of the democratic state, such as being elected for office, proposing new laws, engaging in military decisions, or simply defending their rights. Originally, Athens had no official school buildings for higher education. Sophists and philosophers taught either in private homes or in public spaces like the theater. To recruit young pupils for long-term curricula, they also held classes in gymnasia, where young Athenians underwent physical training. The Cynosarges was a sanctuary to Heracles, located in the south suburb of Athens. At the beginning of the 4th century BCE, Antisthenes used this sanctuary as a teaching spot for his school of philosophy, the aptly named Cynicism.
Η να σταθεί εν επιχείρημα δύο η όρηση, το γιγνώσκην και το επίσταστε, σύμφημιση, αλλά εις τα στραγωγή...
Any free citizen was allowed to involve themselves in the Athenian democratic process. However, to truly influence the flow of politics, their speech and rhetoric skills had to be impeccable. As a result, many sophists taught subjects like logic, reason, and eloquence. These were meant to help students achieve arete, or excellence. But this specific concept of excellence was often challenged, especially by other philosophers. For example, Plato, Socrates, and Isocrates preferred a more moral approach and argued that rhetoric should be used as a means to serve the greater good. Socrates and Plato went even further, declaring that philosophy and wisdom were not only useful tools, but also ethical virtues. Ancient Greek philosophy was multidisciplinary in nature. In addition to wisdom and logic, philosophers also studied and taught math, geometry, music theory, and even medicine. For example, the philosopher Pericles wrote a treatise called On Human Nature, where he outlined various explanations on human physiology. Philosophy's influence was also great enough to affect medicine. Hippocratic physicians were known to incorporate philosophical ideas into their work, and the treatise On Airs seems to be influenced by pre-Socratic theories on air being the first principle of the universe. The famed philosopher Socrates had an ambiguous relationship with sophists. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates is portrayed as being in constant opposition with the famous sophists of his time. Aristophanes' comedy, The Clouds, meanwhile, depicts Socrates as a sophist himself, constantly demanding payment for his teachings. Socrates was in fact very poor and made no money off his teachings. He also differed from the sophists in that while they only taught aristocratic youths, Socrates taught everyone, regardless of station. Unfortunately, his controversial ideas and practices did not sit well with the city of Athens, and he was eventually tried for impiety. Philosophy was not only a collection of ideas, but a way of life. According to philosopher Pierre Hadot, his ancient counterparts had a daily regime of spiritual exercises to combat their passions, doubts, and illusory beliefs. These exercises included meditation on death, contemplation of nature, or speaking with a friend or mentor. Philosophers also followed specific dress codes and diets. They were also part of a community of masters and students. These communities were created and strengthened in schools. Plato founded such a school in the early 4th century BCE, when he purchased a property in a grove just outside of Athens. The school was designed to groom students into philosopher citizens who could eventually rule the city in a measured and fair manner. It followed its own rules and was open to both male and female disciples.
I can tell by the crease in your brow that you're already puzzling over the new things you've learned. Don't be embarrassed. Even the wisest among us need to ask questions before they search for answers. Is there anything else you'd like to do? You wish to test your wisdom? Very well. Let's see how you compare to the great philosophers. The first question is an easy one. What does philosophia mean? Correct. Philosophia referred to the love of wisdom. Time for the next question. The Kynosarges was a sanctuary dedicated to which Greek hero? Correct. It was the mighty Heracles. Now, for the last question. Which play by Aristophanes portrayed Socrates as a sophist? Yes, The Clouds was a comedy that portrayed the famous philosopher as a greedy sophist. Plato even believed that this caricature contributed to his mentor's eventual trial and execution. Well done, Wanderer. Even Socrates would be impressed by the depths of your wisdom. Very well, I'll take you there. Follow me.
Where to next? We only have like maybe 4 tours left? Question mark? Of course, we also have a bunch of discovery sites I need to go to still, in areas that don't have a tour. Looks like we're finishing up Attica. Hey, Socrates! Yep, we just got 3 in daily life now. Athenian philosopher, creator of the Socratic method, known to be quite the conversationalist. Oh, I'm in Arcadia. Never mind then. Well, let's get to it. Time to discover some sights. The player will encounter 7 distinct biomes, 6 on land, 1 underwater, as they journey through ancient Greece. Each features its own flora, fauna, weather systems, and unique topography. The challenge for the art team was to make sure that biomes each had their own individual atmosphere, vegetation, color palette, even down to the type of rocks in each location. All biomes are a joint effort of civil artists, and technical directors who work together to create those landscapes that are driven by procedural rules. In order to create believable procedural biomes, the biome team had to fully understand interaction between elements that drive nature and apply it in-game, explained Vincent Lamatag, assistant art director, lead biome artist. Cross-sections of the 6 land-based biomes: spring, summer, arid, paradise islands, volcanic, and deciduous forest gave a broad spectrum of the landscape the hero will have to navigate to survive. Artist Hugo Puzzoli adds, "Our team had fun translating the diverse nuances of azure blue from the Mediterranean Sea, from the paradisiac white sand beaches to the arid orange volcanic coast." Down we go. Get off the tree, Alexios. You don't know how to tree run? Not that well, anyway. You're not Ratuna Gedun. I know, I just butchered that pronunciation. Radun Hagedun. Stop climbing trees. The 10th labor of Heracles required traveling to the end of the world to Eurythia to receive the cows of the giant Geryon, son of Chrysaor, who came out of Medusa's body, and Kellerhoa, daughter of 2 titans. Geryon had 1 body, but 3 heads and 3 sets of legs. When Heracles arrived in Eurythia, he first killed Orthos, the 2-headed dog, and then killed Eurytion, the herdsman. He finally put down Geryon by throwing 1 poisonous arrow directly into the middle of the giant's head. Heracles brought the cattle to Eurystheus, who then sacrificed them to Hera. Wow, Hercules traveled all over Greece. Hi, bear. Excuse me. Loading. Arcadia is a mountainous region of the central Peloponnese. It has plains in the valley of the Alpheos and Ladon rivers, and around the cities of Tegea and Megalopolis. Its banner depicts a head of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, from the coinage of the city of Phenios. This earthy goddess is frequently depicted on the coinage of cities. The greatest gift Demeter gave to humankind was agriculture, and this relation was always shown by the grain wreath that she wore.
Ό,τι ούν επιθυμείτε, ο άνδρες και γυναίκες, δύναμη φέρει.
Going up. Climbing up. Ancient Greece had an agrarian economy, meaning that wealth came from farming the land. The polis, or city-state, was made up of the astu, city, and the chora, countryside. Citizens conducted business and politics in the city, but many made their living on farms in the country, growing olives for oil, wine for grapes, and grains. Due to Greece's mountainous topography and variable rainfall, it is estimated that only 1/5 of the land was arable, so control of the plains was frequently contested. For example, the Spartans conquered the neighboring Messenians and reduced them to slaves with the goal of controlling Messenia's rich and fertile plains. Even a city as powerful as Athens did not produce enough grain to feed its population and had to rely on grain imports. It's Mount Taygetos. 2016. Pan. Pan was the national god of Arcadia. His name and hybrid appearance as a half-man, half-goat referred to a special role as the guardian of the flocks. Shepherds sacrificed goats to Pan in exchange for protection for the rest of their herd. Pan was believed to enjoy roaming the mountains while playing music on his pipes. The Greeks worshipped Pan, as well as Hermes and the nymphs, in sacred caves. However, in Arcadia, there was an entire sanctuary with a temple dedicated to Pan. The origins of the Athenian cult of Pan have been related by Herodotus. According to the ancient historian, the famous runner Philippides met Pan while journeying to Laconia to ask the Spartans for aid against the Persians. Pan promised to help the Athenians, and made good on that promise at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, when he sowed panic in the ranks of the Persian army. Okay, Marcos, tell us about wheat.
Greetings, my friend. Welcome to Arcadia, home of shepherds, sheep, and manure. I recently made an offer to buy some nearby farmland. Unfortunately, the owner refused, based on completely unsubstantiated rumors that I once burned down 3 farms in Kos. Can you believe it? I've never burned down a farm in my life. I may have once paid someone else to do so, but I assure you, my reasons were entirely acceptable and in the best interest of everyone involved.
You know I'm standing right in front of you, Marcos. I know. I'll pretend not to, though. Your secret's safe with me.
Arcadia was well known for its sublime natural vistas. Farmers and shepherds were seduced by its beauty, and it's easy to see why. I have to leave for now, but I'll meet you again when you finish your visit. Until then, my friend!
Grain was a staple of the Greek diet, to the point where Homer referred to his compatriots as mortal eaters of bread. Grain farming was a meticulous process. Due to dry summers, artificial irrigation was impossible, so farmers had to rely on rainfall to water their crops. This gave them very narrow windows for sowing and harvesting. On a farm of this size, only half of the field would be planted every year, while the other half would lie fallow to avoid exhausting the soil. According to the poet Hesiod, the best time to sow grain was in autumn, and the best time to harvest it was in May. Fortunately, if farmers missed their opportunity, they also had a chance to plant millet in the spring. Before planting in a field, the land needed to be plowed a total of 3 times. Once in the spring to remove weeds, again in the summer to aerate the soil, and a final time in the winter to plant the seeds in the moist earth. The plow was pulled by 2 oxen, while the sowing of seeds was done by hand. After the seeds were planted, a boy turned the soil with a hoe to protect them from hungry birds. Once the sowing was finished, the farmers waited for winter rains to irrigate the field. They also prayed to the goddess of agriculture, Demeter, and her daughter Persephone, in the hopes of being favored with a bountiful harvest come springtime. Grain was harvested in the spring using a curved knife called a sickle. With their backs to the wind, the reapers cut the plant stalks and left the sheaves behind before moving through the rest of the crop. Once the harvest was mowed, the sheaves were brought to the threshing floor. Animal husbandry was an important part of Greek agriculture. Farmers usually kept cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, pigs, dogs, geese, and chickens. The animals mostly fed in pastures, but could also eat some of the farm's harvested grain, as well as damaged fruit and residue from olive oil and wine production. Livestock had several purposes. Their manure was used to fertilize the fields, and their grazing helped remove weeds. Arcadia was a mountainous region believed to be the home of the god Pan, so farmers were more likely to keep sheep and goats than cattle. Most farming tools were simple, handmade implements made of wood and occasionally tipped with iron. The most complicated tool was the plough, which was made up of several parts, including a beam, a drawbar, and a yoke. A 2-pronged hoe, meanwhile, was used for tilling soil, and farmers also had tools for digging and weeding. After the sheaves were harvested, workers brought them to the threshing floor to extract the grain. Oxen or donkeys were hitched to a post in the center of the floor and guided around it, while workers threw sheaves under their hooves. The animals stomping forced the grain kernels out of their casings. Afterwards, the kernels were collected for the winnowing process. Winnowing helped separate the heavier grain seeds from the chaff. It began with using a wooden shovel to toss the grain. While in the air, the wind blew away the lighter chaff, leaving only the heavier grain. To remove the remaining chaff, the grain was tossed in a wooden basket called a lignon, which filtered the grain until only clean kernels remained. Barley, which was used to make flour, was different from other types of grain. Threshing was not enough to separate the barley from its husk, so instead, it was roasted in a specialized tool called a frigatron. After the barley was roasted, it was pounded with a mortar and pestle. The pounded grain was then ground into a meal using either a hand mill or a hopper mill. Grinding was boring work, so workers often lightened the mood with a mill song. Once the barley was completely ground, it was sieved using a wicker basket called a koskinon, making it ready for use. Grain storage areas needed to be dark, dry, cool, contained, and well ventilated to prevent the grain from spoiling. According to Hesiod, the preferred method of storing grain was in a pithos, the same container as Pandora's mythological box. Archaeological evidence suggests that Greeks may have also stored grain in small, walled structures woven from branches. Farms generally needed to store enough grain to sustain themselves for the year and seed corn for the next. Any surplus was either stored for a lean year or sold to markets for profit.
My friend! Good to see you again! You must feel hungry. I know I would, spending all that time watching farmers working themselves to the bone. Now, what else can I do for you? If you say so, let's get started. According to Hesiodos, what was the best month to start harvesting grain? Yes, spring was the ideal time for harvesting. Guess I'm not the only smart one around here. Time for another question. Which tool did reapers use to cut stalks? Yes, a sickle was a curved knife, making it ideal for harvesting sheaves of grain. Only one question left. Arcadia was believed to be the home of which god? Correct! Pan supposedly called the mountainous region his home. Incredible work, my friend. It's safe to say your mind is definitely more wheat than chaff. Of course. Just follow me and we'll be there in no time.
Everybody benefits! Everybody benefits!
If you're not married by 35, you get taxed.
That sucks.
Yeah, better get married soon, old man.
Eh.
I think that's crazy, though.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, to be fair, you were basically in the military trained since you were a kid.
Yeah, because the military training ends when you're like 20, right? 20, 25.
Yeah, you like become an official part of the military when you're like 20. And then you usually, I think it said you're usually in the military till you're maybe like 60.
Yeah. Everybody benefits?
Everybody benefits.
Not you. We're back in Athens. your funny hair.
Ου δύναμε.
So you only got 2 tours left.
What all characters you got that you can pop up as? I got to know what the good peeps are. Oh my god.
You got Cassandra,
Cassandra,
Alexios,
Mercenary Alexios,
a young girl,
a young girl, a young boy.
a young boy. Wants to be a politician when he grows up. Or a soldier. Or both.
Hey, you can do it.
You got Anthusa,
Enthusa, Greek tough guy.
has a passion for poetry but hides it from his friends.
Nice. You can be the blacksmith.
Does his best to live up to Hephaestus. You got Alexios.
Mortal Alexios.
You got
Best
Brasidas,
he
brave and intelligent fighter. You got Archidamos II.
does. Kinemos.
We got Alcibiades,
Socrates.
Socrates, known to be quite the conversationalist. Pythagoras, big into triangles. You got Pericles, Praxilla, Sophocles.
Athenian soldier.
Loves how strong his armor makes him feel.
Good. Persian soldier.
Never skips leg day.
Heck yeah. There's a good man.
Excels at weaving. Longs to be out of the house more often.
Union woman. Union man.
Wishes he were at a symposium right now.
Cult of Cosmos.
Wears modified Greek theater mask. She's always wanted her own eagle.
Alexios again.
Former employee at Abstergo.
Cassandra. Minotaur Frost.
Don't be fooled by his elaborate mask and imposing moo.
Alexios. Yeah.
Always ready to fight for her people.
Victoria.
Supervises Layla's health as she uses the Animus.
Cassandra.
Alexios.
Alexios. Demos. But I find it. So do you think it would select male demos if you played through the game as Cassandra?
I don't know, because I know you can do this separate from the main game. Like, if I wanted to, I could have started this right away.
Interesting.
I don't know.
But they choose female demos.
Even though Cassandra is canonically female. I don't know.
Xenia.
Adore searching for hidden treasure.
Greek hero Cassandra. You don't have Marini yet?
I gotta complete the last 2 daily life tours, which are the only ones I have left. I'm sorry.
Don't even have mom.
Well, I don't well, I just say go to the next suggested one.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
Whereas to be truth be told, I could go to anyone I wanted. But I like going bit by bit and clearing out the surrounding area first. Because that's just how I am. Even though half of these regions don't have a tour in them, so I'm going to have to fast travel anyway. Sometime at the end of the 6th century, the Keramikos hosted a group of artists known as the Pioneers. The Pioneers were colleagues who worked in the, at the time, new red figure style, exploring its artistic potential in revolutionary ways. Artists like Euthymides, Euphronios, Phintias, and Smikros, identified by signatures on their work almost 2,500 years later, brought new innovations to portrayals of everything from aristocratic parties to mythological duels. The members of the Pioneers even playfully painted each other into different scenes. Among the Pioneers, Euphronios is one of the most famous. He is recognized for his skillful rendering of the human body, as well as the experimental perspectives he employed to bring scenes to life.
I have no clue what was going on in that earlier shot, but
I don't know.
whatever.
Ancient Greek pottery came in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and served a multitude of different purposes. Unfortunately, there are few clues as to what different kinds of vases were called. However, modern scholars have assigned certain Greek words to different vases based on their size and possible function. Pottery vessels were ubiquitous in the ancient world, and were used for everyday activities like eating and drinking. They were also used in religious functions and athletic competitions, and some even served as baby rattlers.
Heck yeah.
The types of vases associated with symposia, the all-male drinking parties of the Athenian elite, are some of the most well-known examples of Athenian pottery. For example, amphoras held wine, while mixing bowls called craters were used to dilute the wine with water. Meanwhile, oinkoi functioned
Oinokoi? I don't know, man.
functioned as pitchers, and kylixes were used as shallow wine cups.
So you need 4 different kinds of glasses just to drink wine?
I don't know.
My guy, where's the bottle?
He's like, just give me the bottle.
Just drink it straight from the bottle. Some type of barbarian.
We are Athenian philosophers. We do not drink straight from the jug.
That's a fine looking soldier right there. More vases.
Most vases made in Athens ended up far away from the Kerameikos, traveling as far as France, the Near East, and Egypt. Boatloads, I thought it said Battletoads for a sec.
Battletoads.
Boatloads of Athenian pottery were also shipped across the Mediterranean Sea to be sold in Italy, where they made their way into homes, religious sanctuaries, and graves. One of the richest export markets for pottery was Etruria in central Italy. As a result, Etruria is the source of some of the best preserved Athenian vases. Some of these vases have even been marked with Etruscan graffiti that allowed archaeologists to learn more about their functions.
Wow. So some dude just slathered wine pot on one of his vases or something?
Well, remember, Phidias put "This belongs to Phidias" on his cup.
What a legend.
Whether it was monsters battling gods, famous or infamous lovers, or heartbreaking tragedies, artists used their clay as a canvas to depict whatever they desired. Vases made in the Kerameikos told many stories, ranging from scenes from everyday life, such as 2 young Athenians flirting with each other, to phenomenal cosmic battles like Perseus slaying Medusa. By the 5th century BCE, painters and potters drew on a wide variety of inspirations for their work.
Gotta say, every depiction of Perseus makes me might super fine with that stupid looking hat.
Επί των ημερών ημών, ο οίκος ετοιμάζεται.
Although some Athenian vases are lauded today as masterpieces, their exact value in ancient Greece is often a matter of debate. Workers in the Kerameikos were craftsmen, and operated largely outside the elite social spheres they often depicted on their pottery. This fact, combined with surprisingly low price indications on even the largest and most elaborate Athenian vases, suggests that vases were not exorbitantly expensive. However, certain dedications made by craftsmen like Euphronius hint that some workshops were very successful.
You see, it's easy. If I paint your face on it, I get to charge you double.
Personal engravement, triple cost.
Oh, you say you're from a wealthy house? So how does 6,000 drachmas sound?
Oh, come on.
Dude, the spiky pits you can't jump over.
I hate that.
Yeah, climb up the wall and then jump over the whole wall. Go on. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, that's right. True Spartan war hero right here. Brasidas is dead. So the game just kind of ends, you know?
Kinda.
Gravestone. You can burn the guy.
Honoring the dead was a duty expected by the gods. Desecrating their bodies, allowing the bodies to be desecrated, or forgetting them in the open air was a heinous crime. It was expected to give the dead a proper funeral, especially for fallen soldiers. Bodies were commonly buried or consumed in the flames of a funeral pyre. The pyre was especially common for dead soldiers, as the heat and light of the fire were considered appropriate send-offs. Greek monuments were also painted, including the steles erected to commemorate the dead. Some extensive traces of red and black pigments can be seen even today. The steles usually showed the deceased person in different positions, one of the most common images being a handshake with a family member.
Dope. That'd be cool. You know? How much do you think they pay for that?
Dunno. How much does a gravestone go for these days?
Buckets. Actually kind of expensive. Weather.
Greece is known for blistering hot sun, crystal clear seas, and sandy beaches, but there's much more to the weather in Odyssey than that. The weather system is huge and systemic. The density of the clouds changed to allow for storms and rain to roll in off the sea. As art director Theory Dansuru jokes, since Syndicate, the team knows a lot about the rain. The weather also changes between biomes, complementing the different topographies and creating a dynamic, unpredictable environment. In these images, adverse weather highlights very different atmospheres for the player to navigate, giving the game a more immersive and realistic feel. To enter the city of Athens, you had to walk through a cemetery and pass near numerous corpses of criminals sentenced to death. Nothing there to make you smile. Imagine when it was raining.
Dope.
The last step in the funeral process was placing the deceased into their tomb, an act known as the deposition. Although this was a holy ceremony, the presence of a priest was not required. Women handled almost all preparations. Small offerings were made to the dead, like when Achilles offered his hair to his dead friend Patroclus. A banquet called a Peridinon was held for mourners, and was typically prepared by the grieving woman. This is why women were almost always the first to leave the funeral proceedings while others lingered. They're like, I'm done, I just want to get out of here now.
I'm done. Gotta cook y'all.
I did my job.
Gonna have an awesome party. Why is there a dog out here?
Even in their earliest days, Greeks used perfume in funeral rites, as seen in Achilles' anointing of Hector's body in the Iliad. Perfume helped prepare and preserve the body for its journey to the beyond. Flasks of perfume also accompanied the deceased to their grave as a mark of social status and a balm for the eternal banquets. If the deceased was too poor to afford these bottles, they were painted on their coffins as a sort of empty consolation. Hey, you don't have enough to afford the perfume, so here's a picture of it. Even when a body was burned on a pyre, mourners threw incense in the fire, and afterwards mixed the ashes and bones with precious ointments before enclosing them in funeral urns. Well, at least they always smell nice.
Smells like death. That smells pretty good.
Smells like death. Smells pretty good.
How far go? Are you going the right way? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I'm just trying to go around.
Foolish like the fish.
Hey, pickle sauce.
Pegasus. Pegasus. Ah, boy.
Eh.
Where's the big pig? Ooh, this house ain't looking so good.
Coming through. Coming through.
Great. You're doing great. You're so great. The Burned Farm is a historical location.
Persian siege tactics were a bit more advanced than those of the Greeks, for they knew how to build ramps to get their troops past the city walls, and they also knew how to undermine them. This explains their successes in taking the Ionian cities in Asia Minor that revolted before the outbreak of the Greco-Persian Wars. It would take another 200 years for the Greeks to learn how to properly build siege machines that were capable of breaching walls. Usual siege tactics involved two main approaches. The first was starving a city into submission, but that was time-consuming and exposed the besieging army to the same hardship as the besieged, and it was almost impossible if the city in question was supplied by sea, this being the case of Athens during these times. The second method involved having spies or collaborators within the city walls that would open the gates for the besiegers. Therefore, the most common option for the attacker was to devastate the fields of the defender to provoke the latter to accept an open battle. This explains, in a way, the development of the hoplite phalanx rather than the hit-and-run tactics using skirmishers. The phalanx was formed of a line consisting of the very same citizens that were interested in defending their belongings and their crops, while hit-and-run tactics risked the destruction of those same crops.
Yeet.
Come, Pegasus!
Hurry up, horse. I got places to be. Oh, there's a ram. Ooh, collision. Ooh, collision.
Yeah.
Ultra. Where's Alcabiades?
He'll probably be somewhere.
I mean, didn't you meet him out here at one point?
Oh, yeah.
Because he found a wife.
Yeah, and he was standing over by the statue. Never skip leg day.
Don't skip leg day, guys. You got a ways to go. Why'd you drop your horse?
That's a good question. I just wanted to keep moving.
Saw the altar above and you were like, hey, I need a big pit stop.
When my horse runs into a wall, I immediately get off. It's only 200 meters away.
It's a decent run.
Yeah.
Let's use a sprinter. Oh, it's also up a wall. Because you're going about this like a goon.
Oh, come on.
Oh!
Blah, blah.
This is a scary looking rock. Looks like it had a face on it. Oh, burnt.
Eleusis is a city in West Attica at the northern end of the Saronic Gulf and at a distance of 20 kilometers from the center of Athens. The city of Eleusis was practically unknown until the 1930s, when excavations determined the shape of the classical city. High on the summit, the Acropolis of Eleusis was fortified since the Mycenaean period, and the sanctuary of Demeter was situated lower down the hill and outside the fortification. According to the Homeric hymn to Demeter, Demeter herself introduced the mysteries at Eleusis during the quest for her daughter Persephone. At some point, Demeter stopped at the palace of King Kelios, and as a gift for his hospitality, she taught Triptolemos the art of agriculture. From him, the rest of Greece was educated in agriculture, and it is in Demeter's honor that the people of Eleusis built a sanctuary. Demeter also taught the people the rites of the Mysteries, a secret cult restricted to initiates. The hymn to Demeter provides the association between myth and ritual, and builds the necessary connection for the establishment of the Eleusis cult. Demeter and Persephone were worshipped together at Eleusis and were referred to as goddesses. They were distinguished from each other as the elder and the younger.
Επί τα ψηλεύομαι έτσι το λιπαρότερο.
The Telesterion was the most important building of the sanctuary at the far end of the Sacred Way. This was the temple that was dedicated to Demeter, and the place where the cults and mysteries took place. It was here that the climax of the Eleusinian ceremonies happened. And it was in the Telesterion that the priestesses revealed their visions, and the initiates were prohibited from discussing the events that took place. The Telesterion was a square or rectangular building of approximately 50 meters across with 2 entrances on each side, with an exception on the western side that was built on the rock. Inside there were 8 rows of seats and 40 columns supporting the roof. In the center of the roof there was a hole from which the light would enter the temple. In the center of the Telesterion was a rectangular room called the Enactoron, where all the secret objects of the cult were kept, or where only the Hierophant could enter. Today the architectural remains visible on the site are those of the classical building.
Look at how this is all done up. Some crazy stuff right here. Boys, can I just go?
Kore Praxiclea is one of the most important works of archaic sculpture. It depicts a young woman and was found in Attica during excavations next to a young male statue. The statue is dated to 550 to 530 BCE and depicts a Kore wearing sandals, a full-length sleeved chiton, and a tall calathos decorated with flowers. In her hand she holds a lotus bud. She's also wearing earrings, a necklace, and 2 bracelets. The height of the statue is 1.79 meters, and the preservation of its polychromy is astonishing. Recent research confirms the use of 11 different colorants, as well as gold and lead foil. We know the name of the deceased Praxicleon because it is inscribed at the base of the statue. Her young age is also implied, as she is called Maiden in the inscription, meaning she died before she got married. On the left side of the base is the name of the sculptor, Aristion of Paros. The base was not buried with the Kore, but was used as a building material in a nearby church, where it was recovered. Aristion fabricated and signed other statues as well, which allow us to date the creation of the statue of Praxiclea to between 550 and 530 BCE. It's not impossible that the art was associated with the spheres of power of the tyrants of Athens, and that the statue might have belonged to the Pisistratid family.
That's a lot of words, buddy.
Yeah. Let's go learn about pottery.
Oh, who are we talking to this time? Is it... Oh, is it Purple Girl?
Yeah, I think it's, Aspasia. Yeah. She tends to do, like...
The ghost?
She tends to do, like, daily life and like, Athens and philosophy stuff. Leonidas, of course, is all Spartan. Marcos tends to be, like, kind of agriculture.
Herodotus
Herodotus is, like, history.
He did the battles and